Christian parenting.
So as we bring this all together and we consider this HALT method, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, start to build into your own rhythms as the caregiver. Pause and ask those questions as you start to see behaviors and see if there is a pattern and see how that changes the way that you de-escalate and address your child's behavior. Welcome back, families, to the Call to Love podcast, where, as you know, each week I am so grateful to be able to bring you content related to the practical, the clinical, and always, most importantly, the biblical aspects of the foster care and adoption callings. We are in week 2 of a summer series designed to help you promote emotional and behavioral regulation in your family. Now, if you missed last week, I would highly encourage you to go back and listen as we laid out 10 practical ways that you can promote emotional and behavioral regulation. I gave an overview of that. And then the next few episodes, we are going to dedicate to getting into specific tools related to those categories. So today's episode is dedicated to our first tool, which I would argue is probably the most important, especially as you're beginning to establish emotional and behavioral regulation in your family, and that is the HALT method. And HALT stands for hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. And so I'm going to give you a little practical example just as we get started today. And it's funny how, as I'm studying this and I'm preparing for this, we get a real life scenario that is really applicable to what I'm going to be talking about today. So just the other day, I was at a work lunch and we were wrapping up. I was about to head home, but my phone rang and my daughter was just absolutely inconsolable, sobbing on the other side of the line. And the reason, all of her swimsuits were wet and she was running a little bit late. The neighbors were waiting. I had agreed for her to be able to go on this play date to our neighborhood pool. One of the moms was taking her, and all of her swimsuits were wet. Guys, I don't know why, but she was so upset, and she wasn't being disrespectful, but any solution that I offered, she had an argument for. We get it tied into these conversations when she's escalated where any solution that I offer, she's going to have a rebuttal and, not want to lean into that solution. And so I have learned through trial and error and ultimately through the HALT method how to get to the root of the reason why she's upset. So I'll share a little bit more about that as we go through some of the specifics today, but that just kind of sets you up for a scenario of why on earth would you be upset about a wet swimsuit? You're about to jump in the pool anyway. But there were just a lot of reasons, and I was able to sit down with her later on and dig a little bit deeper and figure out what that looked like. Now, I could have been really, really frustrated with her. I'm at a work lunch. I'm in the middle of important conversations. It's disrupted my time. I'm frustrated because any solution that I offer her, she doesn't want to hear it anyway. And this isn't me speaking ill of my child, guys. I want you to hear that. This is normal scenarios that I'm sure every single one of you listeners have run into and can completely relate to. So this was just something very specific for me. But I want to come back to all of that as we're talking through this HALT method, because I could have gotten really frustrated. I could have snapped. I could have gotten her in trouble when she got home or when I got home from work, all the things, right? But I have learned through trial and error, and quite frankly, from doing it the wrong way and getting frustrated and escalating myself so much of the time, that the Lord has allowed me to learn from that and to be able to employ some of these tools and methods to really get to the heart of the matter, to help my child work through what was frustrating and upsetting her, and to ultimately build more trust and connection. So that is my heart and my goal for you. And always, as the Lord gives practical examples, I like to be able to use those and share them with y'all, because friends, I do not have all of this figured out, and I do not handle it perfectly every single time. But I really celebrate the wins when the Lord allows me, through just muscle memory and practice and being able to teach you guys all of these methods. I'm able to employ them myself, and they really are beneficial. So when you're thinking about when your child is escalated for whatever reason, before you address the behavior, quite literally, I want you to halt, as in stop what you're doing. Try to get rid of as many, if not all, of the distractions around you. Make sure that you yourself are regulated, and then ask these questions. And this is the acronym for the HALT method, and that is, am I or is my child hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? So as I was preparing for this topic specifically and really, really thinking about it as we look at hungry, angry, lonely, and tired, 2 of these are basic needs, right? Hungry and tired. And 2 of these are felt needs, angry and lonely. So I felt like it's really amazing how quickly things can spiral when each of these are not properly recognized and addressed. And so it's helpful for us to view these next things through that lens of, okay, we're talking about basic needs and we're talking about felt needs, and all of them come together to help our child to regulate and for relationship to be restored when behaviors are difficult. But I started with the HALT method tool first because it truly is a game changer, friends. Let's talk about a little bit of the why behind each of these. And then the Lord, even just as I was preparing this morning, gave me a reminder from scripture that I think ties into this beautifully. So here we go. Let's talk about the HALT method. First, we talked about is hungry. This is a basic need for all of us. But I also want us to point out that for kids who have experienced food insecurity as a part of their previous experience before coming to us as parents, friends, hunger is a trigger, and the brain literally reverts back to survival mode and remembers when it didn't have enough to nourish the body. And quite frankly, because of that, it can forget or short circuit the progress that you have made, especially in the early days of helping your child to rewire their brains to feel assured and safe that their needs will always be met. But hunger can be a basic need that can really trigger trauma from previous experiences and cause behavior that can be very, very challenging. So if we're aware of that, especially for our kiddos who come to us either through foster care or maybe from an international situation where their care was not ideal, then if we have that in the back of our minds, then that's something that we can be prepared for and anticipate for our kids. We understand, yes, we all get hungry, but there's another level of hungry that I think would be helpful for us to understand. Now, just basic needs, and for all of us, whether we've had trauma or not, if our blood sugar is low, we get cranky, right? Hangry is a very real thing. So if our basic needs are not met, truly the higher functioning parts of our brains overhaul our ability to regulate our emotions and our behaviors properly. That's true for us as adults, and it's certainly true for our kids who have not been properly trained or had the time to exercise different practices and different means of communication to get their needs met. So we're less aggravated by the behaviors if they're related to hunger because we're understanding these things. So, practically speaking, for the early days of placement, whether it's through adoption or foster care, when you know that food security is or could be an issue, keep a snack basket in your child's room and maybe one in the kitchen. So they have a visual reminder everywhere they go in the community rooms and in their safe space of their room to know that there is food available anytime that they need it. Similarly, if you're out running errands, you're at a play date, you're at a sporting event, you're at church, and you're going to be in between meals, bring a snack bag and a water bottle. Those are key and something just to prioritize to make sure that you can head off any type of a trigger that might come as a result of that hunger. Now, watch your child's pattern of triggers. If you know that they're going to be hungry an hour after a meal, be ready. And it seems like a lot of work on the front end, but if you're anticipating on behalf of your child, that's just another way that you are actually communicating to them. I see you, I care, and I am here and ready to meet this before you have to even think about it or panic. Really important, keep healthy options that are free as much as possible from artificial dyes, as well as things that will burn off in their systems quickly, i.e., empty carbs, things that will leave them feeling hungry really soon after they have already eaten. So instead, let's think of healthy alternatives that are still kid friendly, jerky sticks, some form of protein, something with peanut butter in it, dried fruits, nuts like trail mixes, and then fresh fruit, apples, bananas, grapes, different things like that are the natural sugars that your body responds well to. Certainly, if there's a food allergy related, then we'll modify that. But just speaking in general terms, and it's really hard to think this way, but friends, there's an element of truth to, we're not at our best when we're hungry. And we can say and do some really hurtful and frustrating things. And that is true for us as adults. How many times have we apologized for things we said when we were hungry? Right. And so we've got to have that lens of grace for our kiddos who have not had the time to practice or have not yet been taught the proper way to communicate through words rather than unlovable behavior when it comes to being hangry and that being a trigger point for them. So the first question you want to ask when you're seeing misbehavior or you're seeing escalated behavior patterns in your kids, are they hungry? Number two, are they angry? Now, anger is a basic emotion that we all experience. And there are even multiple accounts in scripture where we see God experience anger. So, anger in of itself is not sin, but it is rather the choices we make when we are angry that can be sinful. Ephesians 4:26 reminds us, in your anger, do not sin. It doesn't say don't be angry. So our kids are going to get angry for various reasons. Now, some of this may just be annoyance over minor inconveniences, us pushing them to do things that they don't want to do, like chores or a routine. And some of this anger may come from just deep rooted pain tied to their story, whatever that might look like. And this ties into two of our main points from last week's episode, where I shared 10 ways to promote emotional and behavioral regulation. The first one being our kids are allowed their emotions, but as parents, we still require respect from them. So they're allowed to be angry, but we do not allow in their anger for them to be sinful and to dishonor or disrespect us as their caregivers. And secondly, to be calm, curious, and consistent. That was number 10 on our list last week. And we're going to talk about some specific de escalation tools in the coming episodes. But in the meantime, here's a quote unquote formula to follow. When your child escalates, when you suspect that anger is the trigger that is fueling the behavior that you're seeing, first you calm yourself. You utilize the calming method with your child, whatever calming method you choose, and then you be curious about the why behind their behavior once their anger has subsided. And then you be consistent to repeat that process over and over and over again. Your child needs to build trust and rely on you to be present and to be there, to be regulated, to model that for you, and to be curious about that why behind the behavior so that you can help them learn to unpack and process so that they can start to recognize the why behind their behavior and start to build upon the tools that you are going to be teaching them. Repeat constantly over and over. And friends, honestly, in their anger, and I've experienced this with both myself and other foster children that I have been interacted with, words may not be necessary in the heat of it all. Sometimes it's better not to say anything. Sometimes just your presence is enough. And sometimes your presence is the ideal way to meet that need, just to be in the room, to see them, to speak calmly if you need to, but otherwise just say, I'm here and I love you. Because a lot of times your idea of what should calm them may be the very thing that agitates them and further escalates the issue. So calm down. Don't do that. Don't cry. You shouldn't be upset about that. Why are you doing this? These are not things that are helpful. They're not going to help de-escalate your child, especially when you have one who is prone to anger and agitation. Rather, they're going to take that on as a challenge and a perceived threat, and they're going to further escalate. It's going to take you longer to de-escalate them in those situations. Raising my hand because I know from experience with my own child and with others. It really is a trial and error experience for you as the parent. And it's why it's important that you build a hefty toolbox to try different methods at different times, because quite frankly, when you have anger escalations, it's a game of roulette. You can pull out one tool that worked the day before and you use that the next day and it doesn't work. So you really just want to build over time in your skill set of de-escalation methods and tools, because you never know what's going to work in any given point in time. Okay, that's anger. Lonely is the next one in our list. Friends, we've talked about this a lot, but God designed every single one of us for relationship and community, and our children are no exception. And if they've come from a place where they were either treated like or told that they were not a valuable member of the family unit, they likely experienced isolation and loneliness, and they can hang on to that for an extended period of time. And quite frankly, the enemy can capitalize on that and speak lies to them, that even though you are doing everything you can to bring them into and make them feel like and experience what life is like as a valuable member of your family unit, they may struggle with loneliness. But don't always associate loneliness with nobody's present, like I am alone in a room. Guys, we live in a day and time where we can experience loneliness in a crowded room and a full house. Loneliness really is a result of not feeling seen or engaged with. So there's a difference between I'm sitting in the room with you, but I'm not engaging with you. Screens are the worst at this, because we can all be sitting in a room and everybody's on their screen, so they're not engaging with one another. And that can still be a really lonely space. It can also be really difficult when there's a lot of high caregiving needs in your family, and you as the caregivers are just trying to keep the tiny humans alive, and you're trying to keep the trauma at bay, and you're trying to do all of the things. So you're not connecting. That can result in loneliness for some of our kiddos, and especially the ones who have less caregiving needs or less emotional and reactive needs. Those kids that are doing good can find themselves isolated and feeling lonely. And so that's not for me to put more pressure on you as caregivers. It's just something for you to take note of, because if you do have unusual behavior arise in a child that's otherwise not causing issues, this may be their trigger, that they just feel lonely. I had a very seasoned mom when I was a young mom, and my oldest son, who's now 18, he had a lot of energy, and I was a young mom. Quite frankly, I was still a selfish mom, and I was drained, and I was learning how to be a mom. And my natural attachment style, as I understand it, is avoidant. So even though I was in the room providing his basic needs of care, I was truly not engaging fully with my son at times. And so I had a mom just give advice. She wasn't correcting me or anything. I think I was seeking counsel in all of this because he was just wearing me out at times. And she said, just very practically, take the first 15 minutes of your day with him. As soon as he wakes up, just to be present. Sit on the floor, read books, play blocks, do what he wants to do, talk about what he wants to talk about. And this will absolutely fill up his cup and set a good tone for the day. And there's less energy that's trying to pull and tug at you for the attention that he feels like he needs. And I tried it, and it was very, very effective. And I've heard the same thing about the last moments of a child's day, reading with them, praying with them, answering their questions, and just be present with them for those final moments before they go into sleep, and end that day. Just be present. This is truly the cure for loneliness in our kids and in us. And imagine what that looks like if we just take intervals throughout our days just to be present with our people and present with our kids, to say to them, I see you, I love you, I enjoy spending time with you, I want to know about you, and you are a valued part of this family. So, back to my story with my daughter's epic swimsuit meltdown. Ultimately, once she was regulated, once I got home, she came home from her swim play date. I was able to sit down with her and I said, Hey, you're not in trouble. I just would like to know. So I'm expressing curiosity to her. What happened that upset you so much? Well, when she started to unpack the story for me, because she automatically understood I'm not in trouble, so I don't have to perceive a threat, so I don't have to shut down. I can actually tell mom what was going on and know that I'm not going to be in trouble for maybe seemingly arguing back, or, however that interaction had been between the two of us on the phone. I wasn't there to help her regulate, first and foremost. So she was feeling a little off kilter. It had been a really busy day. We had all been coming and going. Brothers were going one direction. My husband went to work. I had gone to work. It was just a lot going on. And older brother wouldn't let her call and connect with me because he was trying to be thoughtful of me. Well, mom's in a meeting. You don't need to call and disturb her. Well, she panicked. So she felt lonely in her problem solving. She just needed mom to be able to calmly say, okay, here's our options. And I was able to do that over the phone once I got her calmed down. And so, back up a little bit to that story, I said to her, Baby, mama really wants to help you, but I can't understand your words right now because of your tears. So can you use your words where mama can hear you and understand you? So that was de-escalation point number one. And it took a couple of times to remind her. And then I said, okay, what exactly is it that you need? Okay, here are some solutions. She wanted to argue back with me a little bit because ultimately she wanted a dry swimsuit. I said, well, sweetheart, that's not an option because they're all wet right now. I had just washed them. They were in the laundry. And so I gave her choices. You can do this one or you can do this one. And I'm on my way home. Do you need my help? And so I was able to de-escalate her, but I was able to follow up later on by being curious and get to the root of the issue, that she felt lonely in her problem solving. And so we were able to talk about that and go, okay, next time, what can we do better and how can I help you? So that's just a practical example. Next, we have tired. Not only did God create us to be in relationship and in community, He also created us to rest. We require rest. And He Himself modeled that rest at the conclusion of creation. Our bodies get weak and they don't function well when we're tired. And once again, our kids are no exception. So your child might be melting down because their exhaustion level has reached its limit. So in these moments of escalated behavior, go through hungry, angry, lonely, tired. When was the last time my child rested? Have we been in a high stimulus environment? Have we been go, go, go? Has their sleep been disrupted for the last several nights? Have they missed a nap? Have they gone to bed late? Ask yourself these questions before you dive into a correction of the behavior. Now, I want to pause and say, this is not a substitute for correcting behavior. This is a lens to look through differently at the behavior so that you can correct it properly, address it and correct it properly. So if your child has experienced trauma of any kind, This keeps the body running in a state of hypervigilance all the time, which is like an invisible engine that's running at max capacity. Imagine just pedal to the floor. And we don't think about it because it's invisible, but this exhausts the body tremendously. And this can be why we see a lot of challenging behaviors in our kids. Think about our kids that come to us from institutionalized care and foster care. They are in a state of hypervigilance all the time. They don't know if they're safe. They don't know where they're going next. Nothing is familiar, and no adults seem trustworthy. So they are constantly running at this high level max capacity of hypervigilance, and their bodies are exhausted. So, especially our trauma kids need extended seasons of rest. And I said seasons, not just a day or two in bed, seasons of rest. And most of them have trouble truly resting for an extended period of time because their brain is still communicating a perceived threat. So, even when they have been in your safe and loving care for a long time, rest and sleep can truly be a challenge. So, take some time to recognize that if this is a part of your story. Prioritize periods of rest in your day with your kids. This is just good practice modeled for us in Genesis with the Lord. Whether we are coming from places of trauma or not, we need to be building in periods and seasons of rest with our kids and with our families. And this doesn't even necessarily have to mean sleep, although research does show the impact of even a 15 to 30-minute power nap being highly beneficial for all of us. Any type of rest is beneficial. So, again, notice your child's patterns and try to anticipate that need for rest based on how busy they've been, what pressure they might have been under, whether it be school, maybe they've had a court visit if they're in foster care, maybe family visits if they're in foster care, or they've had extended travel coming home from an international placement. There's all of these different needs related to rest, and it is a key element. So, as we bring this all together and we consider this HALT method, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, start to build into your own rhythms as the caregiver. Pause and ask those questions as you start to see behaviors and see if there is a pattern and see how that changes the way that you de escalate and address your child's behavior. I was in my quiet time this morning as I was preparing to record this episode, and the Lord just brought to mind the story of Elijah in 1 Kings 19. And this is probably another very familiar one to you, but I think it speaks perfectly to the HALT method, and I'm going to explain why. Let me set the scene for you again a little bit. Elijah had just led a showdown between the people of God and the prophets of Baal. Both had built altars to their gods and placed offerings to be consumed. And of course, as we know, the prophets of Baal, despite everything that they tried, nothing happened. And they were essentially humiliated in front of a large crowd of people. Elijah, on the other hand, built an altar. He even went so far as to drench it with water. And we know that the Lord came down, and not only did he consume the offering, but he consumed all of the water around it. And it was just a clear testament to his existence. And the people, as a result, bowed down. They worshiped, they converted, and the prophets of Baal were seized and killed. This infuriated Queen Jezebel, and she swore to kill Elijah. So he ran and he hid. He had been traveling for an extended period of time. He had just experienced the height of spiritual mountaintops with this miracle that he had seen and been able to be a part of. But he was physically, mentally, and spiritually worn down. And he even went so far as to leave his servant behind. So he was also completely alone. So, in all of this, he reached a tree and he sat down underneath it and he essentially begged the Lord to die. He was that worn out. And he was truly hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. And how did the Lord respond in all of this? Well, Elijah collapsed into sleep because of his exhaustion, and the Lord woke him up, and he had provided bread and water. And he told Elijah to consume it and then to keep resting. Go back to sleep, Elijah. So the Lord provided the basic needs, and then he provided the relational needs by conversing with him and giving him instructions and next steps and telling him to keep going. I think that is so cool that the Lord gives us that story and allows insight for application so specific to us as parents. We know He's the perfect father who, as we talked about last week, models regulation and controlled responses, but also He models caregiving for His children. This is a perfect example of that. He saw the needs and He gave the basic needs that Elijah had so that he could keep going. So this is a great reminder for us. When we consistently meet the basic needs of our kids, we're able to build trust, which allows for relationship. And that, my friends, is the basic introduction to the HALT method. So I want to encourage you to make this your go-to every time you experience challenging behaviors with your kiddos. Keep in mind that I am sharing this from a very general lens and did not include the complexities of attachment issues or medical conditions, but the basic principles and practices can still prove really, really effective even in those extenuating circumstances. So as always, if you have any follow up comments or questions about today's episode, I would love to hear from you. Send me a DM on Instagram or send me an email at the link in today's show notes. And be sure, if you did not grab your free download from last week's episode, that's 10 ways to promote emotional and behavioral regulation in your family. The link is also in today's show notes. It totally bombed on me last week, but I did get it fixed. So please, I had a listener. Thank you so much for reaching out, letting me know that it wasn't working, but it should be up and effective now. So please go grab that download. And guys, thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to follow the show and share with your friends, with any church ministries and support groups where this might be beneficial. And I look forward to diving into our next practical tool to add to our toolkit to promote emotional and behavioral regulation in your family. So until next time, blessings, sweet families. Thank you so much for listening to Called to Love today. I love to hear from listeners, and so I would love to connect with you to hear your stories and answer your questions right here on the show. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram, send me a direct message, or send me an email at the link in today's show notes. I pray you have been encouraged by today's episode to walk in faith and continue to embrace your own call to love. Until next time, blessings, sweet friends.